Welcome back to Navigational Mind. I'm Dr. Toy Oyelisi, and today we're going in deep on something I get asked about, maybe more often than any other topic. What does it actually feel like when your mind, after all these years of work and honest reflecting, starts to, emerge? I always picture it like sunrise through late fog, the kind where you still see all the shapes, but everything is just a little brighter, a bit less tense. That's not poetry for its own sake. It's actually what people describe again and again when they begin to shift from a mind organized around fear and reactivity to one that roots itself in truth. I mean, when you really get down to it, an emerging mind isn't some magical new brain that never makes a mistake. But it's a system, your own system, that starts to self-correct without falling apart each time things go sideways. Instead of collapse, there's correction. Instead of panic when you hit a wall, there's this new kind of pause, an actual checking in. Okay, what's the signal here? Where am I misaligned? How do I want to move next? Doesn't mean struggle disappears. No. In fact, you might have the same old worries popping up, but your ability to organize around something honest, to get flexible and realigned instead of rigid or self-defeated, that changes everything. It brings to mind one of my patients, a lovely woman who, after months of gentle self-reflection, described the first time she finally felt like she could breathe easier inside. And it wasn't because her anxiety or sadness had completely vanished, but because she had found a kind of orientation. Not certainty, never that, but a feeling that she wasn't just blown around by the latest emotional storm. That's what I like to call living from navigation, not from reaction. Where was I going with this? Oh, right. Emergence isn't some heroic performance. It's a gradual, almost quiet coherence, the sort that builds trust in yourself the longer you practice it. Alright, let's dig a bit deeper. If you're listening here thinking, but how do I actually know this emergence is happening? What are the street signs? Good question. There are a few that come up again and again. One is a sort of increased internal honesty. You catch yourself, let's say, being less harsh with your mistakes, and more willing to name what's actually true, even if it's uncomfortable. That tension, which once felt terrifying or shameful, starts to become just information. I remember after losing a long-term patient, someone I'd known for years, I expected to spiral into that old fragmentation, the tug-of-war between self-blame and numbness. But instead, there was this strange, honest clarity. Not unshakable composure, mind you, but more of an open, kind response to what was real. I could notice the sadness, the sense of loss, and still orient myself. For a lot of folks, emergence shows up as reduced shame and panic when life gets unpredictable. That doesn't mean you stop having rough days. It means you stop beating yourself up for them. And tension, that classic feeling of, uh-oh, something's wrong, begins to morph into a signal, not a threat. You sort of get used to being a little lost, but not totally untethered. Orientation, even if it's faint, is, enough. And if your identity starts to feel less like a stone tablet and more like something living, growing, flexible, occasionally a bit contradictory, that's another sign you're shifting. There's a lot of mythology about emergence, though, and I want to gently burst a few bubbles here. It is not, let me repeat, not some kind of permanent calm. Collapse can and does still happen. Conflict still comes. Even for those who've been at this for years, the mind can slip back into old fragments. That's not failure. That's just how systems operate. So don't let anyone sell you perfection here. Emergence is capacity, not invincibility. Now, let's talk about what all this means for who you are, or maybe how you experience who you are as things keep changing. If identity starts out as a kind of tight performance, trying to hold up a certain image or stick to one story, the emerging mind loosens all that. You stop measuring yourself by perfection and start aligning with what's authentically true, even if it means changing course. I think that's why coordination increases, fragmentation drops, and the self you experience becomes, more like a river than a statue. It flows, it adapts, it's a system in motion, not a fixed headline. And as we talked about in earlier episodes, the navigation loop, and those small, honest practices, this process never stops. Every time you cycle through, collapse or no collapse, you're not starting from scratch. You're building depth, accuracy, honesty. Direction, not ego, becomes the anchor. And this means each season of your life, whether you're changing careers, grieving a loss, or just learning to pause, brings new opportunities for this mind to evolve. Now, if you're listening, you might be asking, but what do I actually do? Here's what matters most. Notice the little acts of alignment. Keep articulating, actually saying or writing what's true for you in the moment. Maintain your anchors, those habits and relationships and principles that steady you. And above all, remember, emergence isn't a medal you win, it's, well, the natural result of living gently and honestly in 1,000 tiny ways. That's how the mind becomes more adaptive, coherent, and resilient over time. Alright, I'll let us pause here. There's much more to explore, but that's for upcoming episodes. In the meantime, thank you for navigating with me today. Take care and keep orienting, not for certainty, but for the next true direction.